So let's just listen to the part that we're trying to emulate one more time. Now that sounds to me like a little tiny audio sample of a vocal that has been pitched up. So you can find something like that in, umpteen different sample packs. For example, I've got my machine sample library selected here. I've just gone into the vocal one-shots folder. You can maybe use something like that and just manipulate that, perhaps using the transposition on Ableton's sample box if you want to pitch that up. But what I've actually done in this case is pinch a sample from the start of the track itself. If you listen carefully, the very first sound in the track is the sample that I'd like to use, so I've been lucky in that case. So what I've done is loaded up Ableton Live's sampler instrument. I've just set the locators around which bit I'd like to pinch, and I've just dragged and dropped it into the sampler. If I just zoom right in, you can see the bit of the track that I'm actually referencing. Now what we can do is just right click and crop the sample just to get rid of everything else apart from the sample itself, if we want to do that. That's where I've actually got my sample from. I've sampled it from the original track, but if you're wanting to do something similar but different, like I say, just find yourself a vocal sample, something like that. There's millions out there. So I have loaded it into Ableton Live Sampler. In fact, just so we can copy what's going on. Just going to create myself a new MIDI track and just copy the instrument across. Now what you find is that the note C3 on your MIDI keyboard, and there it is in my case, the note C3 on the MIDI keyboard will trigger the sample at its original pitch and speed of playback. Notes up from that will play the sample back at a higher pitch and faster, and down from that, slower and of a lower pitch. So stage one, you've found your sample, you've loaded it into some sort of sampling device, and you've found the note that triggers that at its original pitch and speed of playback. Let's take a look at the pitch bend effect now. So I'm just going to go over to the MIDI tab in this case. And at the bottom here you can see pitch bend range. This is plus or minus 2 semitones. So if I just play that and then also start to use the pitch bend wheel on my keyboard, then I can bend that note down or bend it up to plus or minus 2 semitones, so a full tone away from the original pitch. So having loaded the sample into the sampler, having decided on the pitch bend range, now we can start to create our MIDI clip. So let's listen to the rhythmic pattern. So we're not worrying about the actual pitch of the note, just listening to the rhythmic pattern at the moment of the MIDI notes that we need to program in.
I want your body every...
It's a little bit like that. So that's in fact what I have here. So I'm just going to copy this across. Let's take a look at this. So what I've got here is stage one. We've programmed in the rhythmic pattern of notes. So that's stage one. Now we need to add some pitch bend data to this. So for the first 3 bars out of this 4-bar phrase, one, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. So for the first 3 bars of this 4-bar phrase, it's very simple. We need to go to clip envelopes. We're going to program a clip envelope, and it's going to be MIDI control and pitch bend, which is actually right at the top of the list. So 1, 2, 3 bars. I'm going to, with the left mouse button, just drag a blue box, get hold of the line, and just move it ever so slightly, and that creates me 2 breakpoints. Click to make a 3rd breakpoint, and then we can just start to pull that down. So let's just have a listen to see what that sounds like. That's maybe a bit too far. Let's just bring that up a little bit. So that's the first 3 bars of pitch bend done. The last bar is a little bit more intricate. Let's just take a look at that.
I want your body every.
So if you've got a keen ear, you'll notice that the first few notes of this last bar are actually ever so slightly flatter than the original C3 notes that trigger the sample at its original speed and pitch. There's a couple of different ways around this. What we could do is leave these notes as they are and use a pitch bend data to just bring them down ever so slightly so they're ever so slightly flatter than the original C3 note. Or what I did in this, in the example that I made, was I pitched some of those notes down by a semitone and then used the pitch bend data to make them halfway between the C3 and the B2. So either or, and you get the same result. So the first 4 notes of this bar are slightly flatter. Then it's back up to the original C3 note, and then the last 2 notes again are slightly flatter. So it would look something like that if you left the notes all at the same pitch, or if you did it the way I did it, it would look like that. And either way, it's the same result, like I say. Let's just have a little listen to this. It might need a bit of a tweak. Bring that down a little bit more. Just have a listen to my original. And that's about there. So it's just careful tweaking of the pitch bend data to get the desired tonal outcome. But there's a little bit more automation on the go than what we're just hearing there, as you can see. There is reverb that we need to consider, and also there's a bit of a filter on the go as well, just on these notes here. So if we consider the whole of that 4-bar section again, you'll notice that at the beginning of the 12th bar here, the first few notes, there is a high pass filter on them. They're a little bit filtered off compared with the rest of the stuttered vocal sample. So let's sort that out next. Let's sort that out. So I'm going to go back to the sampler device. There's a filter. I'm just going to turn the filter on. So we need to program something like that. So it starts off about there, high pass filter, bar 12. Maybe a bit too much, but you get the general idea. So again, what we need to do, let's just click this parameter. Let's double click to see the clip. And you notice that it's automatically selected that parameter for us in the envelope section. Again, for this first few notes of this fourth bar, let's just do this. So let's just go back to the synthesizer, the sampler. And this is what's happening. So that's the filter done. And last but not least, there are two different types of reverb on the go here. Well, in fact, there's three essentially different reverb states. The first reverb that you can hear in the first part of the loop is quite a short, sharp, slapback reverb. Then at the beginning of the 12th bar, there's almost no reverb on the stutter, and then at the very end of the 12th bar, you've got a reverb that just rings on for a little bit longer. So three different reverb states there. The majority of that pattern is, like I say, that quite short, sharp, slapbacky reverb, which we'll take a look at in a minute. Then it goes dry, pretty much, where I've put that filter on those notes, and then the very last note has a big long reverb tail on it. So I'm just going to expose the send and returns, just unfold them. So if we look at return track B, this is my first reverb that I talked about, the short, sharp, slapbacky reverb. We've got a relatively small room size. We've got a relatively short decay time. I've sort of exaggerated the stereo field so this reverb will appear quite wide. But importantly, I've added a little bit of pre-delay. So this is the time it takes for the initial impact of the sound for you then to hear the reverberated signal. And there's a 56 millisecond gap between the dry signal and then the start of the reverberated signal. And that gives you the sort of slapbacky type effect. So I'll just add a little bit of this. That's the first reverb. Let's have a listen, see how that compares. So like I said, this happens for the first 3 bars. You can see as I turn send level B, how that affects the envelope. At the moment, it's not following any sort of clip envelope automation. I'm going to turn that all the way up for the first 3 bars, and then we're going to rubber band this last bar and just pull that down to 0. Let's have a listen to that. So that's that one done. So that was reverb that I've got on return track B. Let's take a look at the reverb that I have on return track A and how this differs. So you can see there's no or very little pre-delay this time. The room size is a lot bigger and the decay time is a lot longer. So that, makes that reverb appear a lot larger. Now when you're dealing with big reverbs like this, I tend to pull the stereo image, just make it a little bit more focused in towards mono. So I'd maybe put it around there. Just because your perception of a stereo field changes the further away something appears. So if you add a massive big reverb to something, it's more natural, in fact, if you make that reverberated signal a little bit more mono rather than a big wide stereo image, because that's not how things would happen in real life. So I'm just focusing that in a little bit. Short, sharp reverbs, where you want things to appear up front in the mix, you can make the stereo image a little bit wider. But reverbs that make things sound a little bit further away, you want to focus those in towards mono just a little bit. So if I just touch this send level A where my big reverb is, you can see that's automatically selected for me in the envelope section. And it's literally just this last note, I think, that has this large reverb on. So I can just go to town on that. Let's put that about there. Let's hear how we're getting on. Let's just see how that compares with the original. Just one thing, I think the filter stays a little bit more cut off for just a little bit longer. So let me select my sampler, and it's already selected filter frequency for me. So I'm just going to also filter off the next two notes. And reverb A, let me just turn that up a little bit. And there we go. So let me just put that with the square bass that we've written. And there you have it. So those are the two main elements of that track, deconstructed. And although it is simple musically, you can see, especially with that cut up sample, there's a lot of automation that's gone into that just to make it a little bit more interesting.